All right, so today's a special day in the entrepreneurship class. So this is Bring Your Family to Entrepreneurship Speaker Series Day, and I brought my family. So they will be talking about apple beer. For each of them, apple beer is not the primary source of income. They all, it's one of, for all three, different streams of income.
Trickle in my case.
If you didn't hear that, my dad said that's a trickle in my case, which is true. So I will introduce them, and then instead of hearing from one person, we will hear from three people today. So the first person you will hear from is my dad. His name is Larry Stillman. He is the founder of Apple Beer. You'll learn a little bit about that today. He's also formerly a senior vice president at International Paper. International Paper at the time was one of the largest companies in this country, with over 500 employees and $3 billion in revenue. He's got the entrepreneurial side. He's also got substantial experience as a corporate executive, and then he's also an investor in the stock market. Those are three separate people or separate personalities. And so sometimes when people ask me what my dad does for a living, I say he makes money, because that's just the most succinct way of saying that he has a lot of different ways of making money. He is, let me say this about him too, he's passionate about education, and he's a passionate advocate for education. He's substantially involved in high school and improving high school education, also the arts and sports at the university level, and including this university. So that's will be our first speaker, Larry Stillman. He will be followed by Ashley Simmons, who is my younger sister. She has served as the president of Apple Beer now for 1 year. This is after 16 years of doing sales and marketing for Apple Beer. She has a degree in landscape architecture. She's also a licensed landscape architect. She's the president of Simmons Design, which does both landscape designs and other more traditional graphic design. Ashley is outstandingly creative and is very gifted in a visual aesthetic sense. And as you look at some of the Apple Beer materials, I think that's apparent. Ashley is also very in touch with the feeling and thoughts of people around her. Very intuitive that way. The third speaker will be my little sister, though not my younger sister, Shana Cornell. She is a key account manager at Boehringer Ingelheim, which is, raise your hand if you've heard of this company. It's the largest company nobody's heard of. They do $22 billion a year in revenue. It's based in Germany, and she's a key account manager for Boehringer. She has a degree in accounting from Claremont McKenna in California, and she has a master's degree in English from the University of Utah. She is I should say this too, so founder of Apple Beer, president of Apple Beer, vice president of finance for Apple Beer. Shaney is gifted with numbers, but she's not just gifted with numbers. As I mentioned, she has a master's in English, so she's very gifted quantitatively, but also linguistically, and she is heterodox in her thinking. She's comfortable thinking ways that other people are less comfortable thinking. I promise that's a compliment. we had a discussion last night, and we agreed that we would be polite to each other here. So without further ado, please welcome Larry Stillman.
Well, Tyler, I could listen to that introduction forever, and there for a minute I thought we were going to have to. So, want to talk to you a little bit about the concept of just do it. And you will have opportunities in your life where you might look at an opportunity and say, boy, I don't know, what if I fail? What if it doesn't work? And I guess the thought I would have for you is just do it. That's, want to tell you a little bit about that opportunity that came to me in my life. There was it was pretty much a national soft drink in Germany. And it was, are we changing the lights? Okay. That's how I first saw Vossbrause, which became Apple beer, but it was delivered on horse-drawn beer wagons, and it was managed in Germany by the Schultheiss Beer Company. And I would, let me just see where that, oh, thank you. It gets the name beer from its obvious appearance, and we had a little ritual in the mission home that was played on me, but for a rookie missionary who didn't speak the language very well, and we didn't, that was when missions were for 2.5 years, and so you, in a lot of cases, couldn't speak a word of German, and you were in Germany, and the part of the ritual was we would take this new greenie missionary, which they did to me, and it took me down to a place called Oschinger's, and they would bring out these frothy mugs of Vossbrause and tell me at the time, hey, you know, as missionaries, we need to take a break from this no beer occasionally, and we just need to unwind. And so anyway, that's how I was introduced to Vossbrause, which became Apple beer. And it's been a very fun journey. These are the labels through the years that we have developed down in the lower part. Can you see that okay? Good. And it came down to the fact that it was on the market in Germany with German missionaries from 1925 through 1964. So all of those years, I don't think there were too many business-minded missionaries. Now, some were doctors to be and so forth, so not everyone had a business orientation. But if you did, you had the idea that, hey, I could take that back to the U.S. and probably do pretty well with it. And it was just a matter of just do it. So today, we have several iterations of apple beer. It's been quite successful over the years, and it's made me very proud that I decided, yeah, just do it. And so from that first horse-drawn cart with the apple beer on it to this is the Stillman family on our ranch. And it's just been a great ride. So I'm going to introduce my daughter now, Ashley. She's been introduced, but she's going to come up and tell you more about the specifics.
Well, I am grateful to be here today, and Tyler said we agreed that we would be nice to each other, but I did not make that agreement. So I feel like I want to introduce Tyler a little more to you. I had so many ideas and pre-screened a few of them, which I was swiftly told they were not appropriate stories. So Tyler is truly the most creative and witty person I have ever known, and I think you probably have a small sense of that about him. But we went to high school together, and Tyler is 1 year older than me, so I got to enjoy being in high school with him for 2 years, and I can tell you that he was truly a legend in our high school because of his creativity and he never seemed to feel constrained by social rules. And Tyler uses his creativity to bring joy and laughter to everyone, and especially to himself. So at Christmas time, he wanted to spread merriment, and instead of your traditional approach, Tyler decided to share Yuletide joy through his mohawk. And you may be thinking of a faux hawk that you see a lot, but Tyler had an authentic 8 to 10 inch mohawk. And you'll know that gel and hairspray cannot withstand the forces of such a mohawk. So he created his own concoction to keep it sturdy and strong. And it was a paste that he made from flour, egg, Coke, and baking soda. And he laid his head down on some books and laid there still until it completely dried. Okay, so he's not only creative, but he's committed. And when he got up, it was so solid that it was actually a load-bearing mohawk that he sprayed bright green. He hung tinsel and Christmas ornaments on it and some candy canes. And I can tell you that there was merriment in the halls of our high school when he walked down the halls. He is an absolutely fabulous brother. My focus today is about rebranding. And before we talk about rebranding, we have to talk about what the basics of branding is. So the first of 3 principles of branding are who you are. The second is who people actually think you are. And the third is who do you want to be. Now, when your branding is really solid, all of those things will be in alignment and unified. However, sometimes your branding starts out where you want it, and circumstances and market trends shift, and they're no longer unified, and that is when you engage in rebranding. And I will talk about some of the rebranding that Apple Beer has gone through with our products, but I also want to talk about rebranding professionally. It's maybe not how we talk about it all the time, but there are times in your life where you'll find who you are and who you want to be are not the same thing, or who you are and who people think you are aren't the same. And you can rebrand professionally also. When I was in your place, I had a vision of my path, and I'm very visual. So I would say that's what I thought my path would look like. Maybe kind of difficult to get started, but once you were on, you could see where you were headed, and it was reinforced. You saw your direction. However, this really has been my career path, where there were many curves that I did not anticipate, and I couldn't always see what was next, but it is much more interesting than the first path. And that has been with my profession. I got my degree in landscape architecture, and that's a very specific degree. I got it from Utah State, and it's a 4-year degree. For the first 2 years, you compete for a spot of 25. And if you don't make that 25, you go back and compete the next year and over until it takes you to graduate. And it's a great field to be in because Utah only produces 25 landscape architects a year. So when I graduated, I had internships while I was school, and then I worked for I worked for an architecture and engineering firm downtown for 5 or so years after I graduated. And I noticed something that kind of troubled me. I noticed that every time it was time to put together a presentation to the city or to a developer, I always raised my hand first. And I noticed, geez, I really like graphic design more than I like landscape architecture. Shoot. And so my dad called me, and he'd check in on my profession from time to time, and he said, how are things going, Ashley? And I said, oh, Dad, if I had to do it all over again, I would have gone into graphic design. And my dad started laughing really hard on the phone. And he said, what are you, 90? What do you mean if you had to do it all over again? Do it. And the next time I saw him, he bought me a Pantone deck which is an initial investment that graphic designers make. And so I did. And I started Simmons Design with the help of my husband. And at this time, I started to have my children. And I had always kind of wanted to stay home with my kids and raise them. So Simmons Designs, I did freelance graphic designs. I did logos for corporations and T-shirts, and I've designed a graphic wall for them. And then I also did landscape architecture on the side. I did a park here and there and entries, and I would fit that in to my initial goal of raising my kids. And so that meant nap time and bedtime, and sometimes up till 2 a.m., but I got it in, and I could keep up with my work. It was at this time that I popped my head into an Apple Beer meeting that was being held at our house. And I wasn't working with Apple Beer. I had nothing to do with it because I was, graphic design and landscape architecture. But I popped my head in and I said, just so you guys know, your can is not the right color. And they were like, oh, we know, we're not happy with it. But it was really hard to work with this printing company, and this is the best we got out of them. Can you help us? And so with any family business, if you stick your toes in, you better know how to swim because you get immersed immediately. And from that point on, for the next 16 years, I worked for Apple Beer, and that became my new passion. I had the opportunity to be mentored by my father for 16 years. And he's so incredible and so talented. And with my new position, I call on those 16 years all the time. And I just want to share a few things that I've learned from him that I'm going to try and bring with me as I lead Apple Beer. The first is his innate business ethics. I think sometimes with business ethics, we talk about it as an obligation. But with my father, it was a moral imperative. It was part of who he was. He would say things to us in our meetings like, hey, you guys, let's leave this dance with the same people who took us here. Kind of suggesting to us that just because we can do something didn't always mean that we should, and that loyalty matters in business. I don't think we hear that very often, but it actually, there are many circumstances when it helped our bottom line. When the loyalty that my father had shown customers, they feel so deeply for him that when we were in trouble, when we faced big challenges, one phone call from my dad and things were solved because of his business ethics and the loyalty that he shows. The next thing that I really loved learning from my father is his pragmatic approach to problems. He finds a way to keep negative emotions in business at bay. And when I say negative emotions in business, you may be imagining, Amy crying in the cubicle because no one likes her pantsuit, or the fight over the tuna fish in the fridge. But really, truly, the most common emotion in business is ego. And ego is responsible for more bad business decisions than anything else I can think of. Specifically, one example of that is companies' approach to growth. And Shaney's going to touch on this a little bit more, but Apple Beer has been around for 55 years. And part of the reason that we have staying power in a difficult economy for soft drinks is because of our approach to growth. And my dad had a saying that really, I think, sums up our approach. And that is 3 yards and a cloud of dust. And that is a football reference, obviously, implying that instead of going for a 15-yard play that is more risky, we are going to make a strategic, incremental approach to growth. And we may not make it on the highlight reel, but we will win every game. And that has been our approach to growth, where we are always growing, but we will never grow at a rate that many companies do, where you are overextended. Another approach that I appreciate with Ego is he helps you not take things personally. There was a time when someone approached our company and with a proposal, and we decided against it. And I was the one who got to share the news with this gentleman. And instead of taking it well, he decided to take some personal shots at me. And he was offensive, and I mentioned it to my dad, and he just said, "Oh yeah, sometimes people try and make business really personal. I'm glad we're not doing business with him." And that was it. And that was as much energy I put into it, because that's as much energy as he put into that. So he's really set a good example at checking your ego in business. The next thing that I've taken from him is his approach to worry and fear and fretting. A lot of times, I think when we face a problem, we put more energy into being upset that we are dealing with this than actually dealing with it. And I've learned from him that problems are not roadblocks on the path to success, they are the path. And put all of your energy into dealing with it as quickly as you can. And the last thing that I really feel like I've learned from him is to tolerate risk in business and to never let fear influence my decision. As long as fear is not as long as ego is not the motive for being at risk, right? If you're not wanting to grow so fast to satisfy a sense of ego, I think we have to tolerate fear in business. And so, as you can see, my career has had some interesting turns. And I think if I had said no to certain paths that came my way, these other ones wouldn't be available. So what I would really encourage you guys to be open to the opportunities that come your way. Entrepreneurship is all about that spirit of taking paths even if you can't see where they lead. And I would just say I'm still in the process of rebranding myself. I don't think who I am and who I want to be are in alignment yet, and I want to add more education, and it's a process, and I hope to always be adding more. So the next thing I want to talk about is rebranding Apple Beer products, and where we were really in alignment maybe in the early days, we've seen some challenges in the grocery aisle. Apple Beer, the grocery aisle has changed, and you just have split seconds to get people's attention. 2 seconds, at the very longest, you'll have 14 seconds to get their attention and get them to buy your product. But the grocery aisle, this is a picture of Smith's craft soda area. The grocery aisle looks different than it did when we started out. If you will notice, all of those brands have brand extensions, right? There's not one single product that is just a singleton there. They all are lines. And the marketing value for those 2 seconds that you have people's attention, they have, a billboard compared to we have a tiny little ad. And so we're finding it that we need to go through a process of rebranding to compete in this setting. We needed a line extension, and we knew it. But it was a complex issue because Apple Beer is a very descriptive singular name. It is a trademark name. There cannot be any Apple Beers on the market. That is a wonderful advantage that we have, okay? Like owning the name root beer or owning the name ginger beer. But we own the name Apple Beer. So we're very proud of that, but the flip side of that advantage is it comes with the difficulty of a line extension. How do we expand Apple Beer? Do we expand different flavors. We certainly considered them. We considered apple beer caramel, and we did apple beer 5 originally because we had customers ask for a sugar-free alternative. But we felt that if we continued to expand under the name apple beer, we would cannibalize our customers, so that we were drawing in a group of people, and then we would be dividing their sales up for our other products instead of bringing in new and different people. So we realized that we had to have a different brand name, one that unified our product and allowed for brand extension. So we came up with the name Soda Beers. And what we like about the name Soda Beers is it helps unify our products on our shelves, but it also helps explain who we are. There are still people who think apple beer is alcoholic. So the very name Soda Beers explains to people who we are. So we're a gourmet soda with the last name Beers. There we go. So this is our lineup now. We added our ginger beer last June, and our root beer comes out in May. Each one has a unique flavor and appeal, so we are now going to be pulling people who have different tastes. Maybe if apple beer didn't appeal to someone, they may be more interested in a ginger beer or a root beer. But it's also unified with the name, but also we wanted just not to be the name that unified our product, but the feel. It has a gourmet taste and feel. They all are preservative-free. They're alcohol-free and gluten-free, and they all have natural ingredients. Whoops, that's Shaney's. So anyways, in conclusion, I want to encourage you guys all to ask yourself those 3 questions throughout time. Who am I? Who do people think I am? And who do I want to be? And whether you're talking about a product or your career, to never let ego or worry or fear keep you from going through that rebranding process. Thanks.
Hi there. So thank you, Ashley. My name is Shaney, and my role at Apple Beer has changed quite a bit over the years. I think I'm our longest working employee. I started my first responsibility at Apple Beer almost 37 years ago. So this is before the evolution in some of our child labor laws. I was typing bills of lading on triplicate paper before I even knew how to type. Many of you probably have never owned, seen, typed on a typewriter. It can be a difficult thing to do. So it's been a fantastic evolution to grow with Apple Beer over the years. As I have grown as a person, and Ashley has spoken to what your capabilities and what you're able to do in an organization can change. Maybe that calls for you to leave the company you're with, start your own company. There are a number of different things I've had the opportunity to do with Apple Beer, including many years when I did file the corporate tax returns and was primarily working in an accounting and tax capability with Apple Beer for a number of years. I've also worked with order processing, accounts receivable management, and a brief foray in also doing some sales and marketing for Apple Beer. I've worked at a couple of trade shows. That is not my favorite thing to do, but it is a great way to connect with customers, and depending on kind of the trade show that we've done, there have been some really great opportunities that have come out of some of those conversations. So what I'm currently doing with Apple Beer is a little bit different. I do much more general accounting and quarterly work we have hit the point where the order management process on the front end for new customers is so intensive and so complicated, depending on the chains that you're working with, especially as you get into some of these national accounts like Kroger. Their order entry system is complex, and so it's not a conversation. It's not a buyer, calling and saying, "Hey, we want to get this. Can you send it over?" And then you release the product. There's trainings. It's expensive. You have to enter into portals and portal agreements, and so we have somebody that now does that as a dedicated part of their work. I work much more on the back end, and the things that I work on are. Right now, a lot of management with the line extensions that we've had and the growth in our family of products. There's a lot of raw materials that you manage going into that, different crowns, different labels, carriers, packaging, and people love to raise their prices, right? So if you are buying 20 different things and working with a contract packager to put that together and manufacture your product, when do you raise your prices? If we were to change our prices every single time we got a price increase notification, we'd be in a never-ending cycle. And so really assessing where our margins are, where they need to be, and when do we go forward and make an adjustment, when are the times. So that is more what I work with currently. And then some of the other issues, so there's the piece that Ashley mentioned, the fact that Apple Beer owns the Apple Beer name. It's a descriptive trademark, which is incredibly difficult to get now. It's one of the biggest intangible assets that Apple Beer owns, is the fact that, Red's Ale certainly did not want to be called Red's Ale, but they could not name an apple beer. So they named an apple ale and took as much from our logo as they could without actually crossing trademark infringement. So I work with our trademark lawyers to make sure that as we have new products and as we have brought soda beers to market, that we are doing what we need to do to protect our intellectual property. So I work with that, and then for our physical assets, also ensuring that we have the required insurance that we need for ourselves, our distributors, and our customers to keep us in good standing. So a lot of the things, if I'm doing what I need to be doing, a lot of these issues don't come forward within the company. So that talks a little bit about some of the things that I've done within the organization, some of the changes that the company has had. Another thing that has changed so much in the past 20 years is what people want and what they don't want, almost more importantly now. So when I've thought back to some of the different landscape, the changing landscape in soda market, we have really had some interesting changes. The thing when you look at what people have wanted, it used to be that we couldn't get into some of these places that we were trying to sell apple beer, and this is when I was very young. They wanted to have the Coca-Cola, the national brands, the Pepsis, and we have seen that go all the way to where it's hard to enter the craft market, and you see even key national players like Pepsi and Coke having market entries in craft sodas because they really want to compete in both of those arenas now. So the national brands, lots of concern about what preservatives you can have, what type of preservatives, what you can source as a preservative, and different facilities depending on when you're doing cans, bottles, fountain syrups. How, what do you need, and how do those huge factories process the changing materials, right? And so a perfect example of that is when we made the move from corn-based sweeteners to pure cane sugar. that's a whole different process for a lot of contract packagers. And so one of the changes that we as an organization have made many times is who we are working with. And we have produced our products in Utah, we've produced them in California, we have produced them in Florida, we have produced in South Carolina, we have produced in California, north, south, I think. And so really staying in touch with what people want, and the trade and convention shows are a great way to do that. Reduced calories. How many calories are in a product is something we really wrestled with. We had customers that wanted apple beer, wanted a reduced calorie. You know, what kind of sweetener alternatives are those, and how do those impact your flavor, right? Especially where we want a product that's not overly sweet. Organic, locally sourced, non-GMO. These are all things that we have customers that ask for. Gluten-free. You know, even if we didn't think we had gluten, you almost have to prove now that you definitively don't have gluten. So these are all different changes that we've made as an organization. And it's one of the reasons that we're still here. So that kind of captures a lot of those things, and highlights one of the things that has helped apple beer really be sustainable across the changing landscape, right? You have to evolve as an individual, and you have to evolve as an organization. We've done a couple of different things with local support programs. Utah Zone is a great, has been a great boon for apple beer. We've had some really, really super success there. We've had different export programs that have helped with markets and help connect local businesses to export markets. Small family-owned businesses, and then most recently we found a program that one of the national chains had where companies with female leadership could get discounted rates on the shelf space within grocery stores. And so finding out what those are and taking advantage of some of the programs that state and national governments have for exports U.S. to other markets, and then within the state to take, like a state's own product and really help build that brand awareness even beyond the borders of Utah. So that concludes my my remarks. And do you want to facilitate questions, or do you want me to just open it up?
Yeah, just open it up.
Okay. Any questions for any of us? Yes.
How did you guys manage having a family business, like just working through your differences? Just working together?
Oh, I get to answer this one first. You can come up. Yeah, it's been interesting, and to have the family connection has been amazing for us. To be able to speak really candidly about what you think of somebody's new flavor, that they love this, version, you don't like it. What do you think of the new marketing? I don't like the colors. Here's how I'm looking at doing this. So we troubleshoot a lot of problems, and that issue with ego, it exists everywhere, but in our family, in our meetings, we really put those ego conversations when it relates to the brand and growing the business. Those questions really take a back seat to what's right for the business, what's the ethical thing to do, and where is the company going, what's that vision. I think that's helped us steer clear of a lot of the rivalries that can plague family businesses. What do you think?
I liked your answer. I don't think everyone can do a family business. It tries your relationship, and it also brings your relationship closer. I get to interact with Shaney all the time, and I enjoy that. I think we have a fairly blunt relationship, and we can say things to each other, and then we move on. And I think that you have to have a certain relationship with your family to be able to have a family relationship. But my father's family also had a family business, and I think you have to have a foundation of family is first, and the relationships matter more than anything, and preserving those relationships at all costs. Any other questions? Yes.
Does that kind of make Tyler the black sheep of the family? Maybe he doesn't work for you guys?
We just didn't think he was up to the challenge, to be honest. No, Tyler obviously has done very well, and there are 6 of us. So my twin sister actually played a very key role in apple beer. When she was at BYU for her senior project, she put apple beer in the bottles, and she had a significant role in apple beer for 15 years, and then she started another business of her own. So people have been in and out, and no one has ever been pressured to be part of it or told that they weren't good enough. It was just kind of people led their own lives, and if they crossed, they crossed.
I have a question for Larry. As a mom, I think it's fascinating that you're such an advocate of the education and the arts, and obviously, your kids are very well educated. So kind of talk about that, and what part it played in raising your kid. But education is important, and the arts are important.
That's a great question. Let me respond to that. In terms of education, it's the ultimate strategic weapon possession that you have. And you have to continue, you have to buy into the fact that the game is changing every day. And the only way you can prepare yourself for those changes is through education. So I think we all try and do something outside of the business to help our skill set. And when you quit learning and quit believing in education as a constant in your company, you really start dying. You got to be headed one way or another. So I've participated myself with Wharton Business School, Kellogg School of Business, and all sorts of adult education programs so that, so that we would have a strategic advantage if you can get that through education.
Maybe one more question?
How have you guys decided, I'm sure at points you've had large offers from your competitors, what's been the deciding factor to keep it in the family and keep going with that?
I participated in the sale, a very large sale of a business once, and it was a lot of money, but the decision-making went to the corporate office, and I just decided that's never going to happen again. And there are really advantages to keeping the decision makers very close to customers. And sometimes when you are involved with a large corporation, that decision making goes to some talking heads in a corporate office versus being made close to customers.
So this is the most Stillmans that you guys will ever hear from. So I would like to present each of them with the Cedar Award. This is that we give in recognition of your commitment to, and the generosity you have with your time to come down here. Ashley lives in Layton, which is a 12-hour drive away. So we're grateful for her. And Shaney came up from St. George as part of a different business trip. In any case, just really appreciate them coming and sharing their perspective with you. And also, if it's not obvious, I have a fabulous family, and I'm grateful to all of them. So thanks, everybody. Come throw axes and win some apple beer.